Um, Fuck Comcast. I dislike these people and their shit ass internet. I'm hoping that this is actually working now because that was some bullshit right there. Some real strong
Hmm.
bullshit. Um, we were getting a good vibe going, talking about how the school system is corrupt, not really there to teach kids. It fucks with their psychology. It promotes groupthink, that sort of jive. And then I was getting into, I wanted to know her impression of whether or not the school encourages the military industrial complex. So I was bringing up like recruiters and the fact that, like, I've always thought that they qualified as like grooming children into the cult of nationalism. Um,
Hmm.
Now, in that regard, we were talking about how like kids need like consent, parental consent, in order to go on a field trip, much less to like do anything else, like because they can't consent. So it's weird to me that they would allow recruiters. Before I do anything else, though, there seems to be like a rushing sound in the background of your video that just started up.
Oh yeah, the air just came on, so that's probably what it
All
is.
right, well, it seems to be
Um,
focusing on your voice now that you're talking, so feel free to go.
okay.
In that regard, what do you think? I mean, do like kids get trained to trust the people who say they normally can't consent to do things that they like wouldn't otherwise
Mhm.
do?
Yeah, I mean, too, like I think a lot of this, along with schooling, you have parents who would also go into that type of schooling, um, who and teach maybe you trust your teachers or whatever, who all push you to go a specific route, like military or college, and they definitely promote that like within the school system as well. Like I had said earlier about like allowing recruiters to come into your high school at lunchtime to talk to you, um, allowing I just lost my train of thought. But like I even think like even if you're 18 years old, I think that's really young to be making those types of decisions to where like even though you're technically an adult, like I don't even trust like a lot of seniors would be 18 by the time they graduate, but like I don't even think they should be consenting to the military and what you want to do in college and making those big life decisions at that age. That's my personal feeling anyway.
Right.
But I do think that the adults in your life tend to push you towards that because that's just what people do, you know?
Right.
There's not really a great reason for it. I'm feeling like I don't think college should necessarily like be abolished completely, but I think there are a lot of things too that like could be technical school degrees or like some other type of program that doesn't, like why did they, if you get a philosophy degree from like a college that's like 45 grand a year, and you're paying for all that in student loans, you're probably not going to make that when you get out, but nobody's going to say, hey, maybe that's a bad idea.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, so okay. So the reason I brought up the military initially is
Hmm.
because you have anti-war in your bio. Um,
Yeah.
Certain people have criticized this use of anti-war in your bio. We can maybe talk about those certain people a little bit later, but the whole point that I thought would be interesting to bring up, I think that just like school prepares you for prison, it prepares you for prison-like environments, and I think the military is one of
Hmm.
those.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is because it goes back to having a certain like regimen. Like you get up at a specific time and you have to do like certain things like throughout your day. Um, and the way that like my brother was in the Navy and I went to visit him at the barracks a few times and like they're not set up in like nice places. Like I could never imagine like living that life, but like I don't think it's necessarily like you're not going into the military for a convenient life or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and
I mean, that's
so
not what the structure's about.
right, and so you would say that the school system sort of prepared people for that mentality, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, how much of your elementary school teaching? Because if I understand correctly, you were one of the like more standard L school teachers where they like teach multiple subjects.
Yes, but I was also because of my special ed part of it. I sometimes was co-teaching in a general education classroom, and then there were certain subjects that we would have a few kids who were pulled out for, like English and reading and that type of stuff. We would pull to the side like a small group of kids who had learning disabilities and different, that had like an IEP or whatever.
Right. Okay, so
Because they couldn't keep up with the right general education classroom or whatnot, or at least that's what they were deemed to.
yeah, they didn't fit in.
Right.
So, like, ultimately, the reason I thought that'd be an interesting question, I wanted to see how much of like history you taught and how statist it had to be.
Yeah, I didn't teach much history because like a lot of it is social studies, like at that point, so it's more
Right.
like civics. You might get into like general things like that, but there are definitely certain things that are taught that aren't necessarily accurate or have been reassessed. Like for example, like one of the big things, especially in high schools, is most people are taught like the New Deal, like pulled us out of the Depression. And that's standardly taught in a lot of textbooks, and it's just like not accurate
Yeah,
at
no.
all. But most of the actual books that are used, like different companies, like they buy whatever it is, and they're um, writing a specific narrative, right, within them, and might not be the accurate narrative. It's just like what the school district decided that they wanted to teach, or might not give like all of the information that you need like to actually accurately assess something that might have happened.
Right.
And like another example, I know a lot of people get mad when people bring up the fact that Abraham Lincoln wasn't who you thought he was, because that really messes with people's heads.
Yeah, for sure.
Because he freed the slaves. Um,
That happened to me recently on
so
Twitter. You probably watched that happen, where like I brought up, war is based on lies, all that shit, and it resulted in
mhm,
people being like, "Oh, Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War, that's based on lies. The Civil War didn't happen. Pearl Harbor didn't
mhm,
happen." No, like it happened. You just have the wrong assessment of it, and I think a lot of these people
mhm,
have that wrong assessment because the textbooks are written by statists for statist purposes.
mhm. Right, yeah. I mean, if you look too at, say, a high school textbook in history in a U.S. compare, they can be very different, like in the way that they assess like um, different events throughout history. But there also is a book that was a bestseller when it came out that was like Lies My Teacher Told Me, which is just all about like how textbooks are bought by the schools, what they look at, and like the fact that like there's so much in them that isn't necessarily accurate. And yeah,
Right. Um,
so
so, I mean, ultimately, with regards to that, would you say that, like, the school systems are intentionally leading the kids astray, or that, like, it's more of, like, teachers are going with the convenient, cheap option of, like, whatever textbook they can get the bulk of for the cheapest, and they don't actually care
mhm,
about the content?
yeah. Well, I think it's kind of a mix. And I would also say that, like, I don't think a lot of the teachers who are teaching this stuff are probably teaching to the book. Because, like, yeah, it's convenient, but I don't think, I mean, the people on the teaching level, I don't think that they actually understand it well enough to be able to give another perspective, to be honest.
Right. So they don't.
So,
They've never looked into any
like,
other
they like buy
perspective.
into the lie already, and then it's like, well, this sounds okay, and this is the book that we're using. So, you know,
Right. So a lot of them are just products of the system and they perpetuate it, and then some of the other people are malicious actors who make sure that the system runs the exact way the state wants it to.
yeah, I would say so. Yep.
Okay. And that sort of leads into the next question. Is like when it comes to that, when it comes to the sort of molding of children into what the state wants them to be, would you say that that makes them more likely or less likely to join the military? And like, how many did you ever follow up with any of the kids like through their high school days, and see if they like did something that wasn't conformist, or did you not have access to that information?
Yeah, I definitely didn't like follow up with anybody to see, because that would have been like a big, like a long timeline. Considering I was in elementary education. So, and most of that's going to be decided in high school or whatnot. But I think, I mean, the vast majority of people, like at least when I went to high school, so I'll use that because I wouldn't know the kids I taught how they ended up. It's like they promoted doing something else afterwards that would be like college or military or something. And one of the things they would do too is announce over the loudspeaker if somebody was like what they were doing like after high school. So it's almost like a positive reinforcement to be like, oh yeah, let me tell everybody that I got into this college, or like, even if it's not something they should have been, in my opinion, like going to college for or whatnot. Or like if they were in the military, they would announce that like over the loudspeaker. So there's a lot of things I think that they do to kind of positively reinforce students going into, your standard after high school, you know,
Right.
institutions.
Right. Okay.
So
Now, an interesting question I think might be as to whether or not the public school system, because of all these factors, and frankly, a variety more that we could mention, not the least of which is that it's like an imported Prussian school model, and that's the reason that you got all these German words in the school itself, everything from school to kindergarten, principal, like all these terms, like generally
mhm.
created by and for this indoctrination model that was designed to promote nationalism. Um, I wanted to know if you thought it was like even salvageable.
The school system, I don't think so. Mm-mm. No, because I just don't see like how you can take what we have and like what way like you can save it, because everything is so ingrained right now. And it's, you know, there's such a monopoly on education. So like there's nothing to, you know, and even if you, I think I like the idea of school choice at this stage, but I think it should be a transitional thing. Should be a transitional thing more towards like homeschooling and unschooling and that type of thing. Because I think if you can, and there are actually some places that do like homeschooling communities where it's like a couple families get together, they decide this is what we're going to do. Um, so that if somebody has to work, like there's an opportunity to, um, actually have homeschool and take your kids out of public school. So,
Right.
so I think there
Um,
are options out there. Yeah.
so we've got comments from the previous
Yeah.
stream. I don't know if these people are still here. I hope they are, but it doesn't look like they are. Um, but Sebastian says medication was actually withheld from me, and I thought I was actually stupid my whole school experience. That's an interesting response.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because my experience with like other kids were more that they pushed it, but yeah, that's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pizza the Hut says there is nothing teachers can do to improve student experience. All they do is improve their low end experience. Would you
Hmm.
say that, or like, 'cause you can disagree with the comments if you want?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's I guess it's kind of a mix for that one, but I think some teachers do try to do the best that they can, but like you are stuck in basically kind of like a dead end job that eventually you get miserable. Like you see a lot of teachers who come into it their first year with like bright eyes and like, I'm going to change the world. And then, after time, it just seems like they get so broken down by the system that I do think it does become hard. So I think there is truth to that.
Gotcha.
Um,
Aaron Clary has, this is from D Digital. Aaron Clary has an excellent take on the whole public school indoctrination complex. School isn't for the children, it's for the adults, and the students are the profit source.
mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I'll have to check out Aaron Clary. Um,
Yeah, I
Pizza
don't
the
know who
Hut,
that is, but yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Pizza the Hut says teachers are failed people and create nothing. I think you'll probably disagree with that in some cases.
Yeah, I don't think that that's universally true, to be honest. But I think much like and this might be controversial to say, but I think much like cops, a lot of the people who actually get into it for the right reasons end up leaving.
Right. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
it's the interesting
I think
thing.
there's like some sort of parallel there. Like, because I don't know very many, the people that I know who are still teachers are not great
Yeah.
people. You know, most of the people who left, and it does have like a high rate of leaving like within this first few years. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and in that regard, like one of the key reasons that I've heard teachers I knew left is that schools don't fund them properly, and especially the
Mm-hmm.
ones who want to do good things for kids. So they have to fund it out of
Mm-hmm.
pocket, and it's a shit job because it
Yes.
pays them basically nothing, and they have to fund it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that because you don't get, they'll give you like some money for your classroom, but you don't get near enough if you're going to try and do something good for your kids. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and especially when you're trying to build up like your curriculum for your classroom the first few years when you're starting with nothing, you spend a lot of your money on that type of thing. Like, and you're not getting paid that well. Like, I think when I graduated college, it was like in New Jersey, you got like 37 grand a year for, but there also isn't any like monetary like incentive in terms of if you're better at teaching than somebody else is either.
Right.
Like the pay
Yeah.
scale doesn't necessarily change. Like you get paid more like as you have experience and that type of thing, but like there really isn't, you know, you'd have teachers who are one who like actually tried to do something, you know, and be a decent teacher who would get paid the same as somebody who like was just, you know, read the book and do
Right.
this worksheet.
Well,
You
and
know?
especially since like the standardized tests are still what's demanded, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then like if your kids fail, that's your problem too. So that's another thing I think that kind of probably um, is stressful for a lot of teachers is that it's like, well, it's your fault. You just didn't teach well enough. And then you get to teaching to the test, which is a whole nother problem, um, as opposed to actually teaching for learning. So, you
Yeah,
know,
it's like demoralizing. It's like group consequence built into teaching as well.
yeah. Yep.
So we've also got another comment from Troll with a Purpose says cancel culture is built on consequence dissonance. Uh, that sounds correct. I think that's probably true. I
Mm-hmm.
probably could have been phrased better, but like yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
he also said V covered this when discussing communist prisons. I don't know who V is. But I mean, I'll check that out as well if you can provide a source. He also says, "Oh no, Jeremiah went to alternative school." Uh, I mean, maybe you could consider the last year of my schooling that, but it was still public school. I went to a
Mm-hmm.
continuation school because I hated school for like the first 3 years, and I basically didn't do any work. And so
Mm-hmm.
I had to do 3 years worth of work in 1 year, and make up all the classes I failed. So I went to a
Mm-hmm.
continuation school that let me work at my own pace, like listen to music and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped significantly enough that I did 3 years worth of work in 1 year. Which also kind of pisses me off because I could have just done the work in that amount of time to begin with and saved myself some fucking time and stress. Um, so I mean, I guess you could call that alternative, but I still did the same
Mm-hmm.
curriculum. So
Yeah. And I would say though that like just going to public school at any point in your time, like even if say you went to a different high school, I think it still has a negative impact on you in your life.
yeah, for sure.
Like even if you just went in elementary school or you just did a middle school or whatever, that experience still is a negative one,
Right.
you know?
He also says a little DVT isn't healthy. I don't know what that is. Um, I'll look into it. Project-based teaching showed promise, so they had to kill it by any means necessary.
Mhm.
So you would agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's like anytime that there's something that seemed to be good in a different direction, I think public schools and um, lobbying and all that kind of thing, they try and, you know, like normalize certain activities and trying to, because I know something too was like they eventually were trying to do like nationalization, like that had I forget when it was when that was a big topic when I was in college, to where they wanted every state. So if you move from like, and they said it under the premise of like, if you move from New Jersey to like Florida or like part of the year, you should be able to just like pick up what you were doing in New Jersey. You should be at the same point. But it's like, first of all, that's not going to happen if you're actually trying to teach kids, because that's not how it works. Because sometimes you need to reteach stuff. And second of all, it's like, to me, like, I think that just sounded like it was just a way to get further control of like what schools are doing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've talked about a lot of problems. And I think we're basically done with chat comments. Nobody else is leaving any. So what would you say are solutions? What do you think people should do instead?
Well, I think if you are able to, like I brought up, like homeschooling and unschooling, where it's more student-led or child-led, for things that they might be interested in. And I think that's the best solution. If you can, I mean, not everybody might be able to. Private schools still do have some regulations on them. So like, even if you send your kid to a private school, it's not as strict as like public schools or whatever. But then you also already have, like, you're paying more money because your taxes are already paying for public school. And then on top of that, you have to pay for your kid's private school, which can be problematic. But I think transitionally, school choice would be a start, just to kind of get kids out of public schools, in my opinion. I mean, if that's allowed to happen.
Right.
But I don't think that's where it should end, because a lot of people will be like, well, that kind of seem like that's their end goal. And it's like, no, I think that's just a start, in my opinion anyway. But I think like homeschooling and, I think that those would be the best options, because especially like I'm not a big like culture war person or like care about culture that much, but like if you are somebody who does, then, working with your own kids to teach them, the way that you want them to be brought up, as opposed to pawning that off on somebody else, who doesn't necessarily meet your goals or want the same goals as you.
How dare you? How dare you criticize the way I parent? You are awful, and also there should be a law, and people shouldn't be able to say what you're saying. How dare you criticize? Nobody can understand but me. Now, Billy, go play with your Samsung.
Yeah.
Fucking device culture. Like, that's the real, like, one of the real root causes here is that, like, parents don't parent anymore. They trust other people to do it. Teachers, devices, the internet, television.
They delegate it to something or someone else. Yeah.
That way, if it goes wrong, they can blame those things rather than their own shitty parenting.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Yeah, there's unfortunately a lot of that.
yeah, for sure. Well, anyway, is there anything you wanted to say?
I don't have anything really additional. So I think we pretty much covered most of the bases that we wanted to. So.
Gotcha. All right. Well, where can people find you?
Okay, so I'm pretty much just on Twitter now, and since Alley Jail Tennessee is still suspended, and I'm probably not getting that count back, I am now at Alley, ALI, Willingsby, which is not my real last name, by the way. It's just a joke. Which is WILLINGSBY. So, yeah.
Gotcha. All right, and by the way, I want to take this opportunity to encourage you to join the blockchain so that you can be uncensorable, because I think you got a lot of good stuff to say, and it'd be a shame if it was gone forever.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
Thank you.
With that being said, this will be available also on the blockchain on Library, but feel free to follow me there, subscribe here, like the video if you like the video, and with all that being said, I'm going to be pushing a vlog a little bit later, but only after I get my chili dogs for Chili Dog Wednesdays. So, with all that being said, I think the best thing to say is, fuck school, smash the state.